Been talking a whole lot lately about weather manipulation, the ability that our government and other governments actually around the world have to seize control of the weather, to use it as a weapon, not just against hostile nation states or wartime enemies, but against their own people, including the American people. Hurricane Helene's impact on North Carolina and the surrounding areas has served up as a huge wake-up call. The death and destruction that storm brought with it, with no warning, and the abandoning of storm victims by the government at every level right before an election in one of the most critical swing states on the map has many people questioning what the hell really happened and why. And that's, of course, a very important question because the situation goes a whole lot deeper than just election fraud. It goes deeper than weaponizing a storm against patriotic, independent Americans who can't be controlled, although that is a major part of this equation. But beyond that, Western North Carolina, the area that was hit the hardest by Hurricane Helene, sits on top of the largest lithium deposit in the United States. And as we've covered here on this program, lithium is central to the green revolution being promoted by the World Economic Forum and BlackRock and all of the central banking minions because it powers Super Duty batteries, the batteries that are supposed to replace combustion engines. So it's easy to see why some very powerful people would want Western North Carolina to be completely obliterated and then abandoned, so that they can get inside the earth and get their hands on that lithium. And now that process is already getting underway. So I want an apology from the Rolling Stone and the New York Times and the Daily Beast and Right Wing Watch and Media Matters for calling me a conspiracy theorist when I said that this is what was going to happen, because the abandonment of Western North Carolina is in the works already, and it's being backed and it's being guided by North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper, a Democrat who shares connections to the Chinese Communist Party and its Jewish influence peddlers in on the West with none other than Tim Walz. And just recently, Cooper was on video saying some places just aren't worth rebuilding. They should just be abandoned after Hurricane Helene because the buyouts are better. Take a look at this.
We work with them. We have plans for local governments. You know, in some areas, you just shouldn't build back. And we've been able to convince certain communities and people that buyouts are better, and you create.
So it's pretty obvious that Roy Cooper wants to clear off this land. But again, this goes way beyond some Democrat governor or FEMA or any other public-facing government hack who's gotten wrapped up in this, because just recently it was revealed that there are deep state Ukrainian connections to this situation. A piece of land that's being used by FEMA to supposedly set up North Carolina aid stations is owned by a Ukrainian called Viktor Matviachuk, or whatever it is. Some Ukrainian guy. So once again, there's some Khazarian from the Ukraine at the center of this bad situation. What the hell is this Viktor Ukrainian guy doing in North Carolina, and why are the feds using land that he somehow owns to administer their completely non-existent storm response? And this question matters even more when we think about recent events that have plagued this country. Think about Ryan Ruth, the guy that was arrested at the Trump International Golf Course when the Secret Service miraculously found him ready to shoot Trump. Ryan Ruth was from North Carolina. But not just that, he repeatedly traveled to Ukraine. He was even featured in Ukrainian propaganda videos. So if we connect the dots here, it becomes pretty evident that North Carolina is being used as a rallying point for the global cabal running our government. If we go back a few years, we can even see the creation of COVID, and we can connect it to this state and to gain-of-function research at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So there's a lot going on there, and it doesn't just link back to politicians and CIA-backed terrorists. It's cabal-wide. And now some are even saying that the entertainment industry has played a role in all of this. That once again, a halftime show was used by the cabal to let us all know what they're about to do right before they did it. Because just as Hurricane Helene was making landfall and preparing to completely ravage Western North Carolina and other parts of the South, Katy Perry, who's long been known for her praising Satan, was performing in a halftime show at an Australian rules football game, obviously over in Australia. And while she did this, she was on stage, a stage that was shaped like a hurricane, which was surrounded by dancers carrying in a formation, making it look exactly like the hurricane logo used by weather forecasters and emergency services. We're not. So, I mean, does anybody think that that was an accident? Because to me, it looks more like a slap in the face. And it makes total sense why this slap in the face would happen, because as we know, the entertainment industry and professional sports are all run by the very same central banking cabal that's in control of our government. And they love telegraphing their punches and rubbing it in our faces, everything that they're about to do to us. For decades now, the entertainment industry, music and movies and sports, TV shows, they have all been used as vessels to attack us and to help carry out the Kabbalistic, anti-human, antichrist agenda that we have all been subjected to. So did someone give Katy Perry the call and say, set up the hurricane performance, we're going to slap the goyim in the face? It's a question worth asking. And here to help us answer that and a whole lot more is Austin Witsit, also known as Witsit Gets It online. Austin, thank you so much for coming. We always appreciate having you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, so what say you? Slap in the face, predictive programming, or is this all just a miraculous set of circumstances?
Yeah, I think it's a revelation of the method. You touched on it. It definitely seems crazy when someone first hears the idea that they're telegraphing major world events in halftime shows and stuff, but it just takes a little bit of research to see that they've done it many times. They did it with COVID. I'm sure you've seen halftime shows predicting children running out of the beds and nurses holding them down and floating viruses, as they're called. So I just found that astonishing when I saw that. It's blatantly and overtly the hurricane symbol, right when North Carolina is getting ravished by a hurricane. So yeah, I think it's revelation of the method. And, there are many theories as to why they do that. Some would say that if you are shown the trick that's about to be played on you and you still go along with it, that it's much more powerful.
Yeah, we're talking about this lithium deposit. What have you learned about that? And by the way, I just want our viewing audience to be reminded that previously the largest lithium deposit that the United States American war empire and military industrial complex had control and possession of was in Afghanistan. Well, now that we've lost that, here comes Western North Carolina, home of the second largest lithium deposit, and it's right here on U.S. soil.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I was actually in the Carolinas right after it happened. I had a conference I was speaking at, and it just got destroyed. And then, like you said, there's Kings Mountain, which has one of the biggest lithium reserves in the U.S., and it actually didn't get hit by the hurricane as much as the surrounding area. So a lot of people were saying, oh, well, that theory doesn't make sense because the actual specific area that has the lithium didn't really get hit as hard. But that actually makes perfect sense, because if you were to just completely destroy that area, it would make mining a disaster. But if you're able to gain federal control of all the surrounding areas, basically just monopolize the entire geographical region. So I definitely think that plays a role in it. They also have tons of crystals there, obviously, that we use for semiconductors and chips and stuff. So it does look like a classic federal land grab.
They've been doing this for a long time. They did it with Maui. They did it with Helene. Now just poof, out of nowhere, Hurricane Milton just pops up, sits out there in the Gulf, gains steam, and then smashes right back into where Helene made landfall. Helene, unprecedentedly, it went all the way through the mountains intact to get into Western North Carolina. And then you had people evacuating, but there was no fuel. Here comes Milton, smashing right into the Cape Coral, Fort Myers, Tampa Bay area. And now we have another one that is forming in the Caribbean, and we have another one that is forming in the Gulf. So we're going to see more devastation headed right toward the Sunshine State. When have we ever seen hurricanes take these paths before? When have we ever seen a hurricane season this active?
Never. Of course, they're going to use the cover of climate change or global warming, right? I actually predicted this a few years ago that maybe the next set of lockdowns would be climate lockdowns, and they would have to manipulate the weather to make like crazy events take place to make it look like climate change was real, which anyone who's researched it knows it's pseudoscience. But I actually live right outside Tampa, and we actually moved to this region because it never gets hit directly by hurricanes. And then here we are, hurricanes just consistently coming right in this area. Even the official story is a hurricane hasn't taken place like that in over a century. So it's very crazy, especially when you look into the history of the manipulation of hurricanes. It's not a new thing at all. The government was doing it in the 40s, right? Project Cirrus, 1947. We dropped dry ice into a hurricane and steered it, and it hit Savannah, Georgia, when it wasn't supposed to make landfall. Then they claimed that they stopped doing it, and they were discovered to have kept doing it. And they lied about it for 12, 13 years before admitting it. So if they were able to manipulate the path of hurricanes in the 40s, then what do you think they're doing now?
Well, they're obviously, it's insane that people actually just believe that these people, when they say, well, we're not doing this, I'm going to come out on a stage with spotlights shined on me, and I'm going to tell you what I'm capable of doing, and then I'm going to perform this act in front of you. And then later, when I do the very same thing, I'm going to say, what are you talking about? We don't have the technology to do that. We don't do that. We're not doing that. And you guys are disinfo agents for saying so. They openly admit that they are geoengineering, manipulating, steering, guiding, and even creating storms.
Yeah, of course. And there's actually an Air Force document. It's called Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025. And it details their plan to weaponize the weather. Literally what the document is about. I actually think it's a cover document to make the technology seem more primitive than it actually is. But we have JFK making quotes about how we need to have international cooperation to control the weather. Lyndon B. Johnson saying that he who controls the weather basically is undefeatable. So this is like a well-known objective of our military, and now they have the perfect motivation to do it. They will just claim that it's climate change. I think that people should research it prior to what normally happens is something like this seems so overwhelming that it puts people in fear. The idea of weather is very scary. Like, how do you combat that? It's a scary thing. People choose to not even look into it or believe it. It sounds fantastical, but it is true. And you can just go read the government documents themselves. We also have the 1972 Weather Modification Act, which explicitly details many different methods to manipulate the weather, including lasers and electromagnetic weapons, which would explain some of the radar anomalies. So this is definitely a rabbit hole that worthy of the investigation is.
So we have more storms that are now ramping up. Can you guys put that on? I mean, this is like just a constant thing now. We have another tropical storm that is forming off of the west coast of Mexico. There's another one there that you can see in the Caribbean. There's another one that's coming up. It looks like out of the Gulf, kind of the same trajectory. But as we noted, a lot of these storms, specifically Helene, none of them have ever come directly straight across the Gulf like that from west to east and smashed into Florida. That's never happened before. There's just no logical explanation for it other than the manipulation of the storm.
It seems that way. Yeah, they have a proclivity to go up north, right? So they never come from like the Pacific and come across the Gulf like that. They say it happened 100 years ago or so, allegedly, but they normally go up north because the warmer waters will guide them up. That's why the Panhandle gets hit by hurricanes. This beeline straight for Tampa. And if you actually look at the radar, there are giant waves caught on the radar coming from the Panhandle area straight down, effectively guiding the hurricane so that it doesn't turn up north, which is insane. There's a lot of electromagnetic phenomena caught on these radar systems that seemingly is guiding the hurricanes.
Yeah, this one's making landfall, it looks like, in Cuba as a level 1 hurricane, and then could go right up the east coast of Cuba there in a northwesternly type fashion, smash into the Bahamas, and then directly into the Gulf, where, of course, everybody knows that when a storm like this gets into the Gulf waters, those waters are warm. That fuels the storm and its strengthening. So it looks like, I mean, we're not out of the woods here at all. I lived in the Tampa Bay area. I moved there in 2000. Moved back to Minnesota in 2007, and just a few years ago, bought on the opposite coast. So, I mean, I've been in and out of Florida for a lot of years, and I've never seen a hurricane season that's this active. And it's coming during an election time. And it's coming while there are two proxy wars being fought by the military-industrial complex, the one in Ukraine, NATO's proxy war against Vladimir Putin. They want regime change there. And then, of course, our greatest ally, Israel, as it does a land grab of its own, annexing all of Gaza and expanding into the West Bank, and then, of course, into Syria and now Lebanon. Beirut's airport was closed yesterday after they bombed the shit out of that. And then, of course, you have Republicans all over TV telling you all of the reasons why that's justified. They just kill hundreds of thousands of people, but that's okay because it's Israel, and they're getting picked on, so they have the right to defend themselves. I would predict that Iran is going to respond with some sort of an energy weapon. I think it's the most humane way to once and for all get rid of that problem. Austin Witsit, he's at Witsit Gets It online. Make sure that you go and check him out. We really appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, brother.
Yeah. If you guys don't think that more of these hurricanes are going to be making their way our direction, just turn on the Weather Channel. It's nonstop coverage. Weather weapons by your own government who's openly declared war on you. More of the Stu Peters Show continues next.